They brought her in on a stretcher glowing with violet light, her limbs trembling not from pain, but from something deeper, maybe fear, maybe exhaustion, or maybe the strange atmosphere of this place they were calling a sanctuary for survivors, even though it looked more like a prison, with soft walls and doctors who never blinked. I had been stationed there 2 weeks before she arrived. Ordered not to speak unless spoken to, not to move unless commanded, and certainly not to touch the new arrivals, because the aliens were still too strange, too unknown, too unpredictable even in their broken states. But when they wheeled her in, something changed. The air itself seemed to hesitate, and I did, to standing motionless at the edge of the corridor, while the other soldiers kept their masks on and eyes averted. I watched her as her head turned slightly, and her eyes met mine like she could see something no one else could, like she already knew something important, something sacred about the space between two hearts that had never met but were somehow already beating together in rhythm. I wanted to say something, but my tongue wouldn't move, as if even the smallest sound might break her more than she already was. And then the stretcher passed, and the doors closed, and the moment should have ended, except it didn't. Because later that night, while I was assigned to hallway rotation sector 7, she appeared again, not on a stretcher this time, but walking slowly, barefoot, her skin catching the moonlight pouring through the glass ceiling, and her gaze fixed straight ahead until she reached me and stopped. And then I saw the faintest tremor in her hands, as if the act of standing itself was a defiant rebellion against whatever pain she carried. And without thinking, without asking, I stepped forward, reached out gently, and offered my shoulder, as if that could somehow bear the weight she held in silence. And then she looked at me again and whispered something I wasn't sure I heard right, something soft and fragile like a new leaf in the wind, and she said, "This is what home feels like," and rested her head against me, and the world exhaled. We stayed like that for what could have been seconds or hours, I could not tell, because time folded itself around her presence, like it knew she was not born of it, like it understood that moments with her were not meant to be counted only. Felt her breath was light against my shirt, and the rise and fall of her chest reminded me of something older than war, something that came before pain and survival, maybe something like hope or the memory of it. I didn't speak because I didn't want to change anything, because words felt too heavy and too small for whatever was happening in the stillness between us. She didn't flinch when the night guards passed, though I knew they saw us. I saw the way their boots hesitated, the way their eyes widened just before they looked away, because they knew what I knew, that this was not protocol, this was not permitted, but it was something truer than anything written in their orders. Her head still rested against me, and I thought maybe she was asleep, but then she whispered again, quieter this time, like a secret not meant for the stars, and she asked, "Do humans always feel like this, like warmth, like grounding, like the sky has hands?" And I wanted to answer yes. I wanted to say, "We are not just the ones who destroyed your world, or broke your ships, or took your kin. We are also the ones who can hold gently, who can listen without needing to fix, the ones who can become shelter, even if just for one night." I wanted to say all that, but I didn't, because I could feel her slipping further into trust, and I knew if I stayed still, if I gave her only silence and breath, she would stay just a little longer, and maybe that was enough for now. So stayed unmoving, steady, and let her heart write itself into the hollow beneath my collarbone, and it beat there with a rhythm I knew I'd never forget, not even if the stars fell or the war started again, because that rhythm was hers and it was home. They called her Subject 13, as if that name could erase the soul behind her eyes, as if labeling her with a number could make her less real, less soft, less dangerous. But they were wrong, because there was danger in softness and power in the way she breathed without fear beside me. Then, when every rule around us screamed for separation, they ran their tests and whispered about neural sync ratios and emotional bleed, as if love could be dissected, as if comfort could be quantified. What I saw them flinch when her hand found mine beneath the table during her daily debrief. I saw them glance at the monitors when her pulse steadied just because I was near. I saw the way she sat straighter when I entered a room, like her spine remembered how to hold her, like my presence was a language her bones could speak. And I think maybe it was because sometimes I felt like my body only made sense when she looked at it, when she rested her head against it, when she spoke to me like I was something holy instead of something human and broken and trained to kill, we began meeting in hidden corners in abandoned hallways where no cameras reached. We never planned, it never needed to. She would appear like a thought I forgot I needed, and I would stand and she would lean against me and say nothing, and still it was everything. One night she traced a circle over my chest with her finger and asked, "Is this where your center is?" And I said yes, not with words, but with a breath and a shift of my weight, and a hand gently placed over hers, and she smiled, not the kind that lifts lips, but the kind that turns gravity into a melody. And I think in that moment the whole base could have collapsed, and we would not have noticed, because we were already building something beneath the rubble of our histories, something no protocol could touch, and no war could break, something fragile and defiant and sacred, something that felt like peace. The lights dimmed early that night, not from power failure, but from some unspoken hush that settled over the compound. Like the building itself knew something was shifting, something was being born in silence and shadow, and I found her in the observatory alone, seated against the glass wall where stars poured in like spilled memory. She did not turn when I entered, she only tilted her head and said, "I thought maybe you forgot," and I crossed the room without answering, because we both knew forgetting her was impossible, like forgetting breath or gravity or the feel of soil between fingers after too long away from land. I sat beside her, and for a moment we did nothing. We just listened to the world, trying to remember how to be gentle again. She leaned her head back and whispered, "I do not remember the name of my planet, not the way it smelled, or whether our sky was blue or gold or something in between, but I remember this, I remember you." And that was when I realized she was not clinging to me because I reminded her of something lost. She was clinging because I was something found, and I looked at her and said, "I don't think home is a place, I think maybe it is the person who teaches you your name again when you have forgotten." And she looked at me like I had just spoken the language she thought only stars knew. And she moved closer, not in fear, not in hesitation, but with the certainty of a ship docking after a journey no map had ever marked. Her head found my shoulder again, and her fingers touched my wrist lightly as if to check that I was still real, and when I looked down I saw her eyes closed, but not in sleep. It was something else, maybe rest, maybe trust, maybe both, and the stars above us kept on burning, and I imagined each one was a piece of her past trying to find her, but she did not need them, because she was here now. She was here with me, and she was not afraid. They came for her at dawn, not with sirens or alarms, but with soft boots and hard eyes, the kind that do not see people, only protocols. They said she was being transferred to a facility off-world for further evaluation, and I felt her fingers tighten against mine before she even spoke, before she even turned to look at me. I said nothing, because I was afraid anything I said might shatter whatever fragile thing we had built in this place where we were never supposed to find each other. But she stepped forward slowly, calmly, as if she were not afraid of what was coming, and then she paused, turned to the officer leading the detail, and said, "May I say goodbye?" And they hesitated long enough for her to reach me, and she stood there inches from my chest and looked up and said, "You made me feel real again, and I think that is what home truly is." And before I could answer, before I could even reach for her, she leaned in and pressed her forehead to mine, and I closed my eyes, because I wanted to remember this moment, not in sight, but in sensation, in the way her breath touched mine, in the way her presence folded into my skin. And I whispered, "You are not alone, and you will never be." And she smiled again, that quiet soft smile like sunlight after too many winters, and then she let go and turned away and walked out with them, and I stayed rooted to the floor, not because I was broken, but because I was whole, because I had been something for someone that no war, no scientist, no soldier could erase. And when the days passed and the sun returned and the corridors hummed with ordinary sounds, I found myself walking back to that same observatory, sitting in the same place where the stars still spilled through the glass. And one night, long after the guards had stopped watching me, I heard the softest voice behind me, and I turned, and there she was, no escort, no chains, just her. And she said, "I found my way back because I remembered how you made me feel." And I said, "This is what home feels like." And she rested her head on my shoulder again, and this time she stayed.